Hello and welcome again to another edition of Good Morning Pattaya, Pattaya Channel's very own breakfast show. I'm your host, Nick Pendrell, and joining me once again is my right-hand man, Dave D. How you doing?
Good morning to you, Nick. Yes, very fresh today.
Very fresh.
Very fresh today. It's been a long night, but very fresh and ready to go.
Good. And our guest today is Marcel from Seaside Pix, I believe.
Yes.
Good morning, Marcel.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for coming to join us.
Thank you for having me.
Ungodly hour. So tell us all about Seaside Pix then.
Well, Seaside Pix is a company that actually run out of Sydney, Australia.
Right.
And it's about marine underwater photography.
Right.
So I'm a freelance writer and underwater photographer.
Right, how long have you been doing that for?
Oh God, since I actually arrived in Australia from Switzerland, almost 30 years.
30 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was always a photographer, but the world was always an interesting place for me. So
Yeah, I can imagine.
Switzerland is a small country. So
Yeah, I'd imagine you weren't doing a lot of underwater photography in
No.
Switzerland.
No.
What kind of, Marcel, what kind of, when you say underwater photography, is that for what? Is that for companies? Is that for the general public?
Totally freelance, and I sell my images to Australian Sport Hour magazine.
Okay.
And there have been some images that are sold on prints. Or even so, at the moment I got some images they're projecting in hotels at their swimming pools at night. You know, they have those swimming pool parties. And
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have some underwater pictures and
Yeah.
showing on the side.
So how did you first get into the business? Because as I said, you're not doing any underwater photography in Switzerland. So I can't believe you arrived with your suitcase in Sydney. And
No,
I'm
not
gonna
at all.
become an underwater photographer.
Oh, everybody can. Please have a go at it. It's very easy now because it's all digital now.
Right.
So I still shoot on film.
So 30
really?
years ago?
No, 30 years ago.
30 years
30
ago.
years ago.
30 years,
When
not
I
so easy.
started in Switzerland, I was still a young boy. My first camera was a Mamiya,
Okay.
and it was my first SLR camera. And I used to go in the forest
Right.
early mornings and photograph venison in the forest. In the mist, in the morning mist and all that. So photography has always been a hobby of mine.
Right. So you've always been a
And
photographer.
as I grew up 100 meters from Lake Constance.
Nice place.
So summer was always swimming,
Yeah.
snorkeling. Those days you had goggles, as you call them.
Right.
We call them masks as divers, colored ones. So we produce a little bit of effect in the lake. And I used to look at little shells and little fish and all this, fascinated by it. And then, you know, as I grew older, of course, you go to school, and I did my apprenticeship as a chef, and finished that.
Right.
Worked in a few places in Switzerland, and then, so Australia is a good place to go,
Sure.
and it really is. So that took me to Australia.
Right.
And then I started, my first thing I did was doing a scuba course. I always wanted to dive.
Okay.
And eventually with that came taking the camera underwater.
Right. And what sort of equipment do you need to take photos underwater?
Right. Well, in my time, it was the first camera I had was the Nikon 5,
Right.
which is a compact camera, no housing. Everything can be used underwater without using an actual housing.
Casing.
Oh, really?
Casing,
Yeah.
as you say, yeah. And which is a very, very good camera. But as you probably can imagine, you cannot change lenses underwater.
Yes. Yes.
So, and this camera, the Nikon 5, is not an SLR camera. So you actually look through the viewfinder,
Right.
which is separated. So what you must remember when you take pictures underwater is don't forget to take the lens cap off.
Right.
So at the beginning I left that on many times and the whole roll of film came out black.
So you learnt the lesson quick.
You learn that way,
Yeah,
yes.
the hard way.
Of course, there's books you can read, you know,
Sure.
about underwater photography. There's courses you can do, and then so I did started that way, literally self-taught.
And what about the progression from like the Nikon to today's digital era and everything that's out there now?
What the camera after the Nikon 5 was the Nikon F90X I bought. For that, I needed a housing, which was manufactured by Subal, which is an Austrian company. So casing. It's two halves with an O-ring in the middle.
Sure.
And you have actually 16 controls, 16 manual controls from the outside.
Wow.
Wow.
So
Look at it.
you have to service that after every dive. You got to grease the O-rings and all that. Make sure there's not one drop of salt water coming. It's very difficult, yes.
Sounds it, yeah.
And I only shoot film.
Right.
I never
Still?
moved on to still
Wow.
shoot only film. I just find the color saturation more wonderful, more natural.
Yeah.
Nothing against digital. I have a F80 digital as well, which I sometimes use above ground as well. But I really stick to
But
film
yeah,
because
still
I know it.
traditionalist.
Yes, yes. And the hard thing shooting underwater is you lose colors, of course. you know.
Sure.
So you need strong lights. You need strobes. And that's another thing you have to learn when you actually take a shot.
So how long had you been doing photography before you said, I'm going to become a professional at this, I just want to do this and nothing else?
Well, I didn't do that just photography, can't you?
Sure,
do that.
no, sure.
I had a restaurant besides that as well in
Right,
Sydney.
okay.
But I went on a lot of trips and worked on boats off Phuket, on
Oh.
2 liver boats,
Okay.
excuse me, where I actually taught underwater photography to guests.
All right, you teach
So we
as
had,
well.
I'm an instructor, a diving instructor as well.
Ah, right. So you're the very highest level, I would imagine, of...
Well, I'm master scuba diver trainer.
right, okay.
There's one higher than that.
Right.
Which
But,
is a master instructor, and then of course you
Okay.
become course director. They teach instructors. So
Right.
I didn't need it then.
So over the years, Marcel, I mean, you must have done many dives and you've taken sort of many pictures.
Yeah, I
mean,
got about 10,000 dives logged.
So out of 10,000 dives, is there any one thing that sort of sticks out in your mind that you remember and you've got that picture that says, wow? I mean, have you got that one picture?
Well, there's not just one. There's a lot of them that I like, and you know, I might have about 1,000 that have the wow effect.
Special, yeah.
And if you know, when you shoot film, you don't actually work with them. What you see is what you get. Magazines want edited
Edited
slides.
just-
You know,
yes,
you send them the
well
original
edited. The
slide.
original, yeah.
They're drum scan it. And you know, years ago they used to touch up slides with little
Sure.
brushes and all. It was enormous work. Those
Yeah.
days, digital, you go on a computer and web,
Photoshop
that's
it,
you
that's
know?
it, done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's no real art to it anymore. I find. So if I shoot a roll of film, I mean, you do one dive.
Yep.
You shoot a roll of film, 36 frames, color rehearsal, slide film. And there's one rule: you never come up with a full roll of film because you never know what you see on the way up.
way
There
up,
might be a big whale shark just swimming above you,
Good point, yeah.
and you got no film left. What do you do?
Oh,
I can
Of
imagine
course, I
that.
got 2
I can
cameras
imagine
on me,
that.
but
yeah.
That'll be us, Nick. We'll be at the bottom, 36 gone. We're on the way up and find something
well, it
amazing.
happens. I learned that way.
Yeah?
Yeah, or you can have, you know, at nighttime you do night dives, you do a macro. You
Yeah.
obviously don't do wide angle shooting. You shoot on macro, you know, so you look at microscopic sort of
Yeah.
creatures. They come out, creepy crawlies at night. Everything comes alive at night, you know. And during the day you shoot wide angle, whether it's a fisheye or a 14mm wide angle lens, or you do model shoots underwater.
So where are some, if you mentioned you did quite a lot of photography of Phuket, and obviously
Phuket, yeah.
in,
Well,
I imagine Great Barrier Reef, you've done a lot of shoots.
Great Barrier Reef, a lot too, but I got a lot of nice images from the Similan Islands actually. That's why our 2 boats used to go to from Phuket.
Right.
And you know, the Similan Islands, they're numbered from 1 to 9.
Oh, okay.
And some of the reefs, in my time I was there, I mean, I'm talking about 8 years ago now.
Okay.
Those reefs wouldn't be like that anymore now, but I'm very happy to actually have those shots now.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Piece of
sometimes I
history.
give them away to dive shops, you know.
Yeah.
Where would you
know,
say the most exciting dive has been for you?
Papua New Guinea.
Papua New Guinea.
Papua New Guinea is
Why?
unbelievable
For what reason?
diving.
For what reason?
Well, the marine life is unbelievable. You got saltwater crocs, you got swordfish, you got lots of sharks. I mean, David Dubele, who's the photographer for National Geographic, he regularly goes there.
All right.
You might see in one of those Rolex dive watches advertisement. There's a school of barracuda circling, and in the middle of it,
Yeah, yeah.
there's a diver. So I dived that mummy
Wow.
many times.
Sounds
I got
pretty
shots like
dangerous with crocs and sharks. Have you ever got in any incidents?
Yes, it can happen, yeah. But that's when you got your big strobe arms, you know, and you can whack them away. Or,
Really? So you actually have
yes,
had
there's
to punch a shark?
quite a few of them, yeah.
Good
Yeah,
grief.
yeah. Yeah.
And you weren't nervous about this?
No, there's nothing to be nervous about. What can you? There's nothing you can do. Let's say you do a deep dive and you have to do decompression, and sometimes you might be spending half an hour at 15 meters, then another half an hour at 5 meters, safety stops and all this. Sharks can be around and they start to circle. Even around Sydney, there's a lot of sharks. There's mako sharks, you know, and bronze whalers. Yeah, they do circle a bit. They like the noise of metal. And you know, you got a lot of shackles on your strobes, the cables are attached.
Yes.
They make all this metal noise. Sharks love it.
Excited.
Yeah.
So what's the most exotic thing you've ever shot? There must be some very rare creatures that not many people get to see.
Again, there's been a few. There's one in Solomon Islands. I got a shot of mandarin fish.
Right.
And it's only a tiny fish, but very colorful. They mostly come out around 5 o'clock in the evening.
Okay.
In pairs. Sometimes they mate. Beautiful to watch. This one was alone. It was in the sand, and somehow it was sucking up sand through its mouth and left it out through its sides, which is unknown to do that.
Really?
So I actually sent that shot to the Australian Maritime Museum, and they said they have not had received a shot like that. So
Ever?
they used it. I mean, look at our oceans.
Yeah.
I mean, 72% of our planet is covered by ocean,
Yeah.
and 95% has not been
Untouched.
explored.
Yeah, I heard that we know more about the surface of the moon than we do the
Absolutely.
surface of the sea.
Yeah. But you know, there's a lot of scientists working on that now. They identified something like 230,000 species, but they think there's around 2 to 7 million species. Not even included plankton, bacteria, and all that kind of,
Real things down there.
And a lot of it can be used for medicine as well. They're doing research on that.
Yeah.
And
Very much untapped.
yes,
Very much
yes. I mean, we must take care of our oceans. That's our life is water.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm very, pleased to hear the other day that the Japanese actually had to stop the whaling.
Yeah.
So whether that's still going ahead, we don't know about that yet. I hope it's going ahead. But
Wait and see. So do you sell your photography through stock libraries or?
yes,
just
I got one firm in Germany. They sell it for me. And I got one very nice lady in Koh Samui,
All right.
which I do just a simple deal with her. I just met this lady and I said, look, I gave her a photo CD. She's a marketing manager.
All right.
And she goes around and goes to dive shops, to nightclubs. They can
Do the projection.
perhaps
images.
do a
Yeah.
projection,
Yeah.
and if they like the images,
But they also go to print in frames and things like that. I would imagine.
anything. I'm yet to have an exhibition yet. In all those years, I never had a vernissage. I never had an exhibition.
All right. Well, maybe that day. Still got something to look
It's
forward
still
to.
happening. They're waiting in a special hotel in Bangkok for me to do that.
Yeah.
So you have a big.
I'm not
back
ready for
catalogue.
that. I'm busy with other things at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So many things to do. What is the most exclusive place that any of your photography has been featured? Any particular magazines that stand out?
Well, Sport Diver magazine, I was always a contributor, regular contributor for that. And there's been a lot of competitions. Maybe the biggest one in that order was the Australasian Underwater Photographer of the Year.
Oh wow! Which year was that?
It was in 2003 I got that.
All right.
So that's all of Australia and Asia.
I can imagine that's.
And there's a
very,
lot of good photographers.
competitive.
Underwater photographers.
Wow.
There's a lot of good ones,
So your library at home must be full of old stock, ready to go
Old
on the
stock,
walls
yeah.
of some gallery.
Yes, yes.
show you
And
the work.
nowadays where they make it, they do it on digital and print it on canvas.
Yeah, yeah.
I've got lots of ideas and I just wanted to make it different.
It must be great though, Nick. Somebody's been doing this for 30 years and
Yeah.
actually has never shown it in the
That's
gallery
exactly.
of all his work from beginning to end. I think
Yeah.
that could be a great showing.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think you should do
believe
it.
so. Yes, I will.
100%.
I will do it. I will do it.
In the interim, do you have a website where we can see some of your photos?
Not anymore. I just stopped my website because I got so many requests, and now I'm here in Thailand, and everything is in Australia. Because I'm doing something else yet at the moment, which I don't really need to talk about it. It's beside the subject.
Okay.
But
So how can anybody get in contact with you if they wanted, they've watched the program today and they say, oh, I'd love to see some of his work. I mean, where can we see your work?
that's probably through Hotmail, through email address, and just
Hotmail. So you remember your Hotmail address?
Yes,
Yeah, if you can give us that one now.
Seaside Pix at hotmail.com.
Thank you, Marcel. Thank you for telling us all about your wonderful business. And so contact Marcel if anybody wants any pics. Thank you.
Thank you
Marcel.
very much.
Thank you.
Dave. Thank you, Nick. Thanks for having me.